Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast.
It's not actually about being unique, because I think very few brands are genuinely unique in their own category, doing completely their own thing. It's about relative difference. Are you standing out enough for somebody to want to choose your brand first? And that is also not a fixed point in time. It's not like, oh yeah, we're different now. We can kind of sit down and relax.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Marc Binkley and Vassilis share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
And just before we get started with this episode, V and I would love for the show to be super valuable to you. So if you could rate the podcast, leave a review, leave some feedback about who you'd like to hear about or the topics that are really important to you, that'd be great. Welcome to the Sleeping Barber. Today we've got a great guest. Jane Ostler is joining us. Jane is the Chief Insights Officer at Kantar. And Kantar is just continuously putting out lots and lots of great research, great publications. For 20 years now, you've had the BrandZ report, which is incredible. The new report this year has just come out. We're going to be talking to you about that. There's a report around the trends for 2025, 2026, going into 2026. Media reactions report. There's so much to talk to you about. We're very excited to have you join us, Jane. Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast.
Thank you. Great to talk to you both.
Yeah, likewise. Before we get into BrandZ, you were one of the lead authors of the Blueprint for Brand Growth, which really I think was if I'm not mistaken, focused on the meaningful different salient framework. And before we get into BrandZ and the trends in general, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about what that framework taught you about and that work taught you about brands in general and about growing brands.
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's quite a big question, so I'll try and do it fairly briefly. But the meaningful, different and salient framework underpins most of what we do at Kantar. And we have proved that brands that are meaningful, i.e. they meet customers' emotional and functional needs, brands that are different, and those are brands that stand out from their competitors and also that you would kind of find unsubstitutable versus another one. And salient, you know about it, you're aware of it, you've heard of it. Actually, if they score highly on all those 3 points, which is we research in our brand tracking and lots of our other solutions as well, they are more resilient in difficult economic times. They have the benefit of pricing power, i.e. they can charge a relevant, appropriate margin, which is one of the things that's often neglected as a CMO task. It's actually, pricing is one of the core tools that CMOs should have in their armory to drive revenues, but a margin as well. And obviously brands need to be salient as well. And we've proved that those brands are more resilient in times of crises. So, for example, strong brands consistently outperform stock market indices. And it proves that marketing has a financial value. Brand equity is a thing which really counts. And your brand is your company's most valuable asset because it enables you to do a lot more. And our blueprint for brand growth was a huge piece of work based on some analysis of billions of data points. And we showed in that the principles of brand growth are kind of irrefutable as well. So what brands need to do is, as I said, they need to be meaningfully different to more people to grow. They also need to get more people to know about them, to like them, to have them first on their list. We call that predispose more people. They need to be more present. They need to be in all the right places. And they need to find new space. Now, this differs for various different types of brands. It depends on your category. It depends on your size, your starting point.
Right.
And whatever is happening now with AI, these principles still hold true. So BrandZ, the report that we released this year, is the 20th edition. It was a really big edition. And obviously we see huge, trends in different categories and different brands. But what underpins all of that is our measure of meaningful, different and salient.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it all unique as well. Well, hello from me as well. Jane, great to see you again.
Hey.
I'm really curious about this. And, in your opinion, what is that difference between observing a trend and understanding a principle?
Well, it's a really good point. And it's actually often, I mean, for anyone who spends any time on LinkedIn, you know, you just get your head in a sort of massive swirl because people confuse the two quite easily. You know, for the last 25 years.
It's an understatement.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it does your head in, doesn't it? You don't want to look on it too often. But, you know, and there's lots of experts, and that's great. But I think we always have to remember that there are strategic things and tasks that marketers need to undertake and they need to constantly keep an eye on, as well as setting direction for the brand, what their ambitions are. And then, you know, and there are sort of big things that turn out to be strategic, like how you use AI, for example, or generative AI. And then there are the tactics, you know, there are the channels. Now, all of these things may influence your strategy over time, but I think the principles of brand growth hold true, whatever the technology, whatever new channels appear. And, you know, this is why marketing, I think, is such a fascinating role, because you have to hold all those things, you know, in your influence at the same time. If you look at maybe 2 years ago, rising trend of creators or influencers or something, and that's still kind of really big now and it's still growing. Ultimately now they're changing the structure of marketing teams. There's completely new capabilities that teams are having to develop to manage creators and influencers.
Such a good point.
Yeah, new measurement techniques that we have to come up with to show how they compare with other channels and other techniques that marketers are using. So actually, you know, understanding the difference between strategy and your tactics or how you activate is absolutely vital. And in a way, it helps you kind of sort out the priorities, you know, rather than everything being screamingly important all at once. Like, what are the important things to get right first? I think.
It's really interesting. I mean, there's a couple of things you mentioned there that I find really interesting. The predisposing people, I'm sure we can talk more about that later, but the idea that trends can become almost a replacement for strategy in a way. And I wonder, because there's a new thing to do, and so all of a sudden that becomes the thing to do, and not necessarily because it fits within your overall strategy. It's just another thing on your to-do list. And so, you know, there's a new trends report every year. And is there any connection? You know, there's multiple new trends reports every year. Is there a reason why we would say to stop chasing trends?
Well, no, because, okay, certainly the trends that we produce every year, Marketing Trends 2026, are sourced from across Kantar, and they're sourced from our experts in various different areas, all of whom interact with our clients every single day.
Right.
So, and we have data to prove that these are growing trends, or they're things that are having more influence, or marketers are spending more in some particular sphere, like, I don't know, sponsored events or creators or digital
creators. You brought up.
Yeah. So we have to take note of these things, and it's something that marketers need to, you know, make sure that their teams have some kind of focus on, or even a strategy for. I mean, you know, if you look at something like the rise of TikTok, you know, if you're a marketer, you can't really ignore it. I mean, there might be a couple of categories where you can, but, you know, what you then have to do is say, not just, we should be on TikTok, do whatever it takes, guys. You know, you have to think, how do we, as a meaningfully different brand, amplify what we do on TikTok and do it in the right way for TikTok? But it has to be centered on your brand and what your brand is about. And it has to be connected activity with everything else you do. So yes, I think trends are important, particularly when they're data backed. They're not always data backed, to be honest. You know, marketers do need to keep ahead of the curve and pilot activity and experiment and invest in innovation and finding new space. So it is actually part of the job to understand what the meaningful trends are, I would say.
And maybe that's part of maintaining the meaningfulness, and the salient part is by being in those channels or trending opportunities like creators we were talking about, and getting involved.
But I suppose maybe that's the difference, is that it's not just all about the trend. It's about what your plan is and what your strategy is and the choices you're making on who to target, not to target. And then whether or not those things fit into that plan or not.
And, you can look at, there's a lot of talk at the moment, for example, with, the possibilities with AI around hyper-personalization, hyperscale, micro communities we've identified in our trends as well. But as a brand, and a brand leader, you need to decide whether you're going to get involved in that. Hyper-personalization might be great for some brands and some categories, but not at all relevant for others. So it doesn't mean necessarily following trends like a sheep. You have to make it your own. And as you say, do it in a way that amplifies your meaningful difference.
Mm-hmm.
We're operating currently in quite a unique environment globally. And I think, for the most part, investments have been pressurized quite a bit across various industries. So if you were to put yourself in that role of CMO, right? You're looking up to wrap up the year right now, getting ready, trying to get everybody excited for 2026. You've got the budget, could be flat, could be maybe it's grown, doesn't matter, but you're sitting here in an executive meeting. On the one hand, you have like the 20-year stock performance chart from BrandZ, showing that the strong brands and BrandZ portfolio outperformed the S&P 500, which is great. On the other hand, you're sitting there and you're trying to defend marketing department's investments, the total A&P portfolio.
Yeah.
How do you approach that challenge in a way that can still give you the best opportunity to succeed in the new year, while still leaning on the report and the data that you have in front of you, saying, hey, we have to be looking here?
Yeah, I mean, that is a huge question. It's a really good one. And I think first of all, it depends what category you're in as a brand and what category categories you may want to bust into or stretch into. The imperative for the CMO and the CFO will be growth of the brand. Yeah, coming back to the principles of how do we maintain our meaningful difference and our salience as a brand, some of that will rely on, getting your brand strategy right, making sure you're meeting people's needs, making sure you're anticipating people's needs. So having all the kind of research to back that up, the trends analysis, the social listening, all of that sort of thing. Right. But it's also about understanding how you're going to get more people. I mean, one of the biggest challenges of brands today is actually that in many Western markets, populations are declining. So it used to be much easier to grow because you could grow along with the population. That was just the base level of growth. So now brands have to try a lot harder to stand out and to be different. And so having the budget conversation obviously relies on an understanding of what activity you did last year, how that drives performance, having all the data, the CMO has to have all the data at their fingertips at the analysis, whether that's ROI, whether that's brand equity data, whether that's effectiveness data from the exposures, the advertising, customer experience data, all of those, and brand tracking data, all of that will feed into improvements that have been made on previous year's investments. But going forwards to justify a budget, I mean, it depends on the company's stance as well, because some organizations work from, last year's budget and justify it and see if you can get a little bit more for next year. Other organizations will work on the principle of zero-based budgeting, where you have to build every year from the ground up.
From scratch.
Yeah, prove your points from scratch again. And, for a marketer, I think having the data at their fingertips is their biggest weapon, if you like, in their armory.
Yeah.
And, the biggest challenge is proving how everything works together in marketing, whether it's sponsorships, whether it's innovation, budgets, whether it's what channels you're using and where you're leveraging your largest investments. Ultimately, it all comes down to how they all work together synergistically and whether you can prove they're driving brand sales or even preferred, actually, both together.
It's a really, You mentioned the predisposing part, and just to kind of build on what V was saying, like that predisposing people, more people to your brand is not the same thing, which makes a lot of sense and is a key component of the meaningful, different, salient framework.
Yeah.
And I'm sure probably a big part of the playbook for a lot of the brands in the top, the BrandZ top report. But it's a hard one to prove it when you're talking to let's say an executive team or a board, because the predisposition doesn't always mean like I don't have the click data to show that the attribution, like the predisposition, as clearly.
And now a short word from our sponsor.
This episode was sponsored by Quadical. Did I say that right? Quadical?
You did. Quadical. Yeah.
Quadical. Mark, what is it?
Well, V, I'm glad you asked. Quadical is my own company, actually. So, I'm the Sleeping Barber podcast co-host with you, but I also have my own company, and so I'm happy to sponsor the Sleeping Barber podcast.
Love that,
because I give so much time to it. But Quadical is a fractional marketing leadership firm where we specialize in evidence-based marketing, and we do consulting work for companies typically between $30 to $300 million. And helping them navigate some of the challenges that people have, like, I know something's broken, but I'm not quite sure how to fix it, nor do I have the time to fix it. Fair. And so that's where we help out a lot of people.
Well, I'll speak for Mark as well, because you're wearing your Quadical hat right now. We appreciate your sponsorship of the Sleeping Barber podcast. And for all those that may be interested, we do have a whole bunch of sponsorship options. Always looking to bring on new sponsors. We have a lot of creative ideas that can really help across a global audience.
Thanks, V.
No, thank you, Quadical. We appreciate your business.
And now back to the show.
Yeah, I know. And actually it is provable. And in the blueprint for brand growth, we do prove it. Like, we know, for example, that investing in your brand to make it meaningful, different and salient drives growth today, but it also drives future growth in the next 2 years as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it increases your chances of getting a sale. Now, everybody has to acknowledge that not every single consumer is in the market for every product and service at once.
Fair.
Now. Like, we all get that, right? So it's not that complicated for others to get their head around. Automotive market is always the one I refer to, because it's kind of, you're predisposing people in some instances years before they might be in a position to buy, but you still need to get people in the right frame, even just to put it on the short list, right? So predisposing more people is just increasing your chances of a sale. The thing that's happening today, I think, that is changing the landscape fairly significantly is generative AI search. And, that is, we've identified this in our trends, it is going to have a much bigger impact on brands than perhaps people thought maybe even a year ago. Because instead of always trying to attract a consumer's attention, which is what marketers have been doing for decades, centuries even.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What they've got to do now is answer the consumer intention. I'm looking for a vacation. I'm looking for a new car. I want something that's small. I want something that's kind of fuel efficient. How your brand shows up in answering those intentions, those questions, is now just as important, I think. And lots of brands know this, and lots of brands are kind of starting to get a kind of Gen AI visibility strategy together. Yeah. That's one of the things that we're saying is like a must do for, the coming months. And so you have to say that, there is the brand, and brand equity has a role. Not only does it mean you're more resilient, but it also actually ensures that your base sales continue and don't drop off a cliff while you're doing all these other activities, perhaps to top them up.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important that brands have a really balanced approach towards driving short-term sales and building long-term equity.
Right.
And it'll be different in different categories.
I love that you brought up AI search, because it's probably one of those things that's going to disrupt the traditional consumer decision journey, if you will. It's still part of the research phase, et cetera.
Yeah.
But now consumers, the level of expectation of sourcing that information, reducing that friction, if you will, to the desired outcome, is becoming the most important thing. And those brands that were able to do that and close that loop a lot quicker will be the ones successful. But it was just a couple of weeks ago, Mark and I, we do every bi-weekly, we do the Barber's Brief, which is like just highlight things that are in the news. And there was this article that actually touched on like 7 core things that you need to be doing. A lot of people don't realize there's a big technical element that is involved with this. There's the content side of it as well.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious if you've come into your own research on AI search and, what brands should be doing in that space.
Yeah, and it's about being visible to the algorithm. But one thing that we also talk about a lot to our clients is also your meaningful difference needs to show up there.
Yeah.
Well,
great point.
Because, we all know that, conversations around Gen AI, whether it's in creative or whether it's, as a sort of search LLM function, could mean that everything tends towards the mean and everything becomes a bit the same. Well, toothpaste is a toothpaste or whatever. And so you have to make sure that it's not just the functional product and service requirements of your brands are showing up in the right places, whether it's Reddit or, anywhere else. But also it's the content and the tone of what you do is being portrayed well. So, there's great examples of, things like how-to videos and stuff, which are very prevalent on some social media platforms. Maybe those things need to show up in other places as well. That's part of a brand's content. It's not just that your new mascara gives you better eyelashes. It's like, here's the demonstration. And, our brand is a helpful brand. We're going to show you how to do it. So all of those aspects of your brand somehow have to show up. So yes, it is technical. There are organizations like ours that will support companies doing Gen AI, visibility strategy and a brand strategy. But, this is the evolution, if you like, of marketing, and it's the evolution of marketing services. Is that, one thing that we're all great at is adapting and including new capability.
I love that.
And it made me think, as you're saying that, the AI overview is an example in the article. There's so much stuff that went into that. And kind of coming back to what you were saying earlier, Jane, the connection point for me was it's not just an item on a trends list. There's actually, bake it into your strategy, there's a capabilities component, there's a skill component, like a talent pipeline development. There's maybe some technology requirements. And so, all of that stuff is really important when it comes to like seeing a trend and then actually making it meaningful and doing something with it, as opposed to just going, oh yeah, that's a trend. Like, well, oh yeah, check the box. We did that too.
We'll do that. Yeah. And I think the other thing is a sort of continued, focus on where technology and Gen AI can do the job for you and where a human still needs to be involved, whether it's human oversight, human checking, even, dare I say it, human ideas, like somebody coming up with a kind of creative concept. So, it's almost like we see it as brands now need to they need to predispose more people, and that includes human consumers and non-human consumers, because obviously then the other thing that's kind of fairly early stage now, but lots of industries are making big inroads with this, is AI agents. And commerce is a hugely hot topic. And you extrapolate that out to, machine-to-machine transactions where humans aren't even involved. You just set your LLM off for the day, go out, go to work. And, by the time you got back home, it's made a whole load of decisions and bought some things for you.
Yeah.
And we collectively as an industry, I think, have to decide whether that's something, we have to understand whether that's something that people actually want. And it might be that we end up with a kind of a split notion where some consumers are completely happy to state their intentions and let technology do all the work and all the agents kind of running around doing what they need to, and other people might reject that completely. But marketers will need to satisfy both of those groups of people.
Before we jump into the BrandZ, the 20 years of insights there, and not that we're going to go through 20 years worth of insights, but just some of the highlights.
Year one, yeah.
Let's start at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Let's go way back.
Because we're on this topic of trends, I just wonder, and you've mentioned a couple of these, I just wonder if you could kind of highlight a few of the trends that really stick out for you, where you think, thinking about sort of the anti-trend approach to trends, in that thinking about it more as a strategic deployment. Like, where do you think are some of the biggest opportunities for people to start investing in some of that pilot opportunities, or just get into it now because it's going to take some time to figure it out?
Yeah. I mean, we've spent a bit of time on the kind of technology trends, the agents, AI visibility. There's also synthetic data, which a lot of marketers are piloting at the moment. And the revelation fairly recently that actually quite a lot of synthetic data is just built on basic LLM data anyway, shows the importance, and I would say this, wouldn't I, of having trusted and responsible data underpinning synthetic data. So that's something we talk about. I think there's also there's the big rise of using Gen AI in creative content, in producing films, videos, ads that we see every day online. That's expanding hugely. Ensuring that you have high quality, effective content is still important. That's what we say. But there's some really human angles to the trends as well. So one of them is about treatonomics, and it's like giving, this is like a consumer trend, if you like, of people just realizing that the world is a hugely complicated, quite stressful place. Everything is volatile. What can you do to make yourself feel better? So giving yourself little treats, small pleasures, everyday things, whether it's buying a cake or whether it's, getting yourself a little decoration for your hair or some clothes or something, is something that people are prepared to invest in to give themselves some kind of short-term enjoyment. So, all brands can tap into that niche trends and actually bringing joy to people. That could be a brand's purpose if they put their minds to it. Making things pleasurable for people when perhaps the outside world seems rather difficult. I think the other one that's also quite interesting was we have one which we say is, we have other trends, like retail media, etc., which is going to be more used. And creators, we've spoken about, they need to kind of take account of themselves and ensure that the communications are effective. But the one that's actually probably a little bit controversial in some quarters is, we call it DEI is dead, long live inclusivity. We've done so much research that proves that inclusive marketing does predispose more people, funnily enough.
And go figure.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't just drive, it is actually essential for growth, because actually consumers do want diversity in and representation from brands. And so it needs to move on from being kind of either being completely ignored in some cases or performative in others, and actually move to being sort of authentic inclusion in marketing. It's not just the marketing either. It's like, it has to kind of reflect itself back in your organization. And I know that, with world politics the way they are, that is changing. That viewpoint is, as I said, can be seen as controversial, but anything that provides marketers with a growth avenue, I think, needs to be taken hugely seriously. And if there are any risks, then marketers have an easy way to manage risks or take calculated risks, which is that they do the research first. You don't just put content out there and hope that it works. You can do the research first and see what the likely impact is. So there's that. And I think the only other thing I would mention is, the use of Gen AI creative, I think, is the one that is really another kind of radical shift for marketers. And that's really disrupting the traditional creative agency model, indeed media as well, with the use of AI, media planning and buying. So there's some really big, yes, they're trends on the one hand, but they're actually quite big underlying shifts in our industry, we think.
For sure. The DEI is dead, long live inclusivity is really interesting for me personally. I just came back from New York, and there was a lot of languages I heard walking around New York. And it was I don't know if they're tourists. Who knows? In a lot of cases, they're not, because they look like construction workers, I suppose. But there's so many languages in a place where you think of it being, America, and where DEI is dead, I would say. Arguably, you could make that case. But there's so much diversity there. So it's not like a label. And I like the way I'm hearing what you're saying is that it's not about the label. It's about not arbitrarily shrinking your market.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With just too much of a uniform creative approach that only attracts a certain part of the segment of market. And so it's more about including everyone who could be a potential customer and not restricting based on, well, it's easy to get that bit of creative.
When I worked on, this was a few years ago, I worked on an amazing project in marketing. I was in marketing, and we ran the switch over to digital television in the United Kingdom. So we switched off analog TV and everyone had to go digital. So it's like extreme marketing, because like the whole population had to do something. It wasn't like you were just inviting people to buy a chocolate bar or something. Like everybody had to do it, otherwise they wouldn't be able to get their television anymore. And, very quickly we realized that, we had to appeal to everybody. Old people, young people, disabled people, people who English wasn't their first language. We had to try and reach everybody to ensure that nobody was left out. And that was the mission. And in a way, I think that's what marketers need to do today, because if your job is to grow your brand, you need to try and target everybody who is even vaguely going to be interested, or switch to your brand. So why would you knowingly exclude anybody? And it doesn't, as I said, it doesn't have to be performative. There are some really, good examples of Dove, for example. Some of those kind of brands have done some really good examples of inclusive marketing. And also we have different channels for, different kinds of marketing nowadays. They all need to connect together. A campaign needs to connect together. But you can use the technology and the capabilities given to us by different platforms, different brands, different targeting to enable you to deliver messages to those different groups of people and make them appropriate. So in my mind, it's like, well, why wouldn't you if it helps you to grow, which we've proved that it does.
Fair point.
Yeah.
There was the one trend that I think for me really stuck out, because I don't think we've ever tied them together this way, was creators need to earn their place in marketing effectiveness table.
Yeah.
Because it's like, the one is use creators, because everyone's saying use creators, because it can unlock growth. But what I love here is they need to understand like the marketing effectiveness side as well. Right. And I think that's the unlock there, especially as brands look to invest, because this ecosystem of creators is just blowing up. But we have to make sure it's underpinned by something. And I think marketing effectiveness is one of those things that can really do a good job of that.
Absolutely. And if you look at how creators were managed when that whole thing started kicking off, it was an extension of the PR team, let's get a few influencers on board kind of thing. And it was part of the PR budget. Now it's firmly in the marketing budget. It's under marketing's control. So it's also marketing's obligation to understand how a creator campaign compares in its effectiveness to radio or television or an event or social video. So actually, some of that rigor and measurement needs to be applied, and clicks, likes, engagement, all of those kind of terms don't really cut it. You have to look at kind of harder metrics, which are sort of brand impact and sales impact. The difference between creators, of course, and other channels of marketing is that creators aren't entirely within a marketer's control. Sure, they control who they pick, the roster that they have, and you might have a kind of pyramid of kind of mega star creators. You have, millions of followers, and you might have some micro ones, and you might have some in between, and you might select those depending on the kind of campaign you're trying to run. But ultimately, you're not paying them to be your actors. Like, here's the script, do what I say.
No.
You're paying them to have their own, you're buying a bit of their equity, actually.
Yep.
You're transferring some of the trust that people have in your brand over to the creator and hoping that consumers will make the link. And you're hoping that your brand will shine through, even though it might not be as present as it would be in a 30-second video. So it's a big component of creator activity, I think, is trust. And brands need to get the right balance between here's the brief, here's what we want you to do, and then releasing it into the world and letting the creators do their own authentic thing and bring the brand in. So in a way, it's a really fascinating topic because it's actually almost like a reversal of control that marketers have had since the 1940s, 1950s upended. And I think the struggle at the moment is what's the right balance? How far does the creator brief go? And if the branding doesn't shine through, then there's kind of no point. So you've got to get that balance right. The relationship has to be worked out and managed carefully.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I want to pivot a little bit and shift to the BrandZ study because I find it's a really interesting dichotomy almost, the trends versus the BrandZ and the 20 years of insights you got from that. Again, we're not going to go year one for either year 20, but more just like what were some of the big things as we're looking at these trends, and again, year over year, and there's going to be multiple reports we're all going to see. It's going to be exhausting over the next couple of months of seeing all these reports and feeling like we're behind. What can we learn from the brands that survived the 20 years of the BrandZ study?
Well, of course, like just to start with, globally, and you'll probably be aware of this, actually, US brands are now over 4/5 of the top global brands. So they're all housed in the, 4/5 of those brands are now housed in the US. Chinese brands are a small part, 6%, but that's actually gone up in, it's doubled in the last 20 years. So from a small base, but it's doubled. But the US brands, a lot of those are tech brands, the big brands that we've heard of. Apple was number one in 2025. And, one of the things that does stand out, I think, from BrandZ, for the brands that have survived those 20 years, because remember, a lot of brands actually haven't, is that they are consistent. They are consistently strong brands. So, yes, they invest in marketing and they produce high quality marketing, but they're also perceived to be innovative. They're not scared to reinvent themselves, move with the times, remain different and meaningful. I think there's some interesting emerging brands in there as well that we've seen this year. So there's always something new, but ChatGPT is the highest new entry in the top 100. Chipotle, is that the correct pronunciation? That's also entered into 100.
As far as I know,
I did try. And, there's also Spotify has entered. So brands that can leverage technology in a meaningful way for consumers, I think, are the ones that seem to have done really well. I mean, you can see in the top 10 here, we have Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Nvidia, chip maker, obviously, Facebook, Instagram, and then there's McDonald's. In fact, if you look at the top 10, that's the only brand that isn't really kind of tech related.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, but McDonald's does a great job on predisposing more people. That's how they adapt with trends. They market to everybody. They're the same-ish all around the world. Consistency is a good theme, actually, that we always talk about for successful marketing. It doesn't mean you have to do everything identikit everywhere, but behaving in a consistent way in your marketing, in how you show up and your presence is important. Retail has gone up as well. That's the other thing that's happened. That's since the pandemic, really. And, retail's gone up like 48% in its brand value. So there's really lots of information in there. So I think the learnings we have from BrandZ are really about all the small things that you do in your marketing team connected with a strategic imperative, ladder up to making you a strong brand. That builds your equity. That means that you can justify your marketing budget for next year, because it's never been more important to stand out. It's a marketer's job to do that.
Yeah. I'm going to try to squeeze in one more quick question here. I know we're coming close on time. If you can humor us for one more.
Yeah.
Obviously, the information is so rich, and it's very easy for a lot of people to dismiss it and say, you know what, I'm not one of those big brands. These don't apply to me.
Yeah.
What would you say to those smaller brands? Do these ideas and principles still apply?
And by smaller brands, maybe that just means non-trillion-dollar companies.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Just a few billion instead.
All the normal ones.
Yeah, like $1 billion company comparison.
Yeah. No, the principles absolutely still stand true. And I would encourage your listeners to look at the blueprint for brand growth, because we actually do a bit of a double click onto small brands and what they need to do that's slightly different. So if you look at, I'll give you an example. Okay, as a small brand, you may not have the marketing budget that some of your bigger competitors have, but you may have some points of difference that you wish to leverage or amplify in a way. And as a small brand, you probably can afford to do things in less traditional ways, more disruptive marketing, a different approach to creators. You know, being a disruptive brand is something that is doable. If you're finding new space, if you're trying to innovate, we have a great chart in the blueprint that shows that the job of a small brand, first of all, is to take away customers from an existing category to persuade them to switch. It's a big brand's job to invest all the billions in R&D and to bust into a new category. So actually small brands and big brands do have different jobs to do when they're trying to grow. And ultimately, yes, you need to be meaningful and different. Salience is difficult when you don't have a big budget, because ultimately what you need to do is buy large amounts of reach. But you can also get large amounts of reach if you're being a bit disruptive and, you know, people are willing to share your content at no cost, which can benefit those brands. So yes, brands do have perhaps a different emphasis on different elements of the blueprint, growth accelerators, we call them. But, you know, if you're a new-ish startup brand today, you know, you could make your sole job, you know, your AI visibility strategy. You could just start with that and double down on that. While for other brands, it's just a tiny part of their activity. So you can still stand out in LLMs. So there's always something that small brands can do that doesn't necessarily need to cost a fortune.
I love that.
It's about having the right thought process to start with, and then deciding how you activate it. It's not this. The blueprint isn't about all brands need to do the same things. It's about they need to work out what their approach is, what their strategy is to all the different growth accelerators, and then do it in an authentic way for that brand. One thing that AI might bring is the sea of sameness. Brands need to try hard to avoid that.
That's a real risk, I think, for a lot of companies. There's a really great book from I don't know how long ago it was now, but called Different. I think it was the name of the book. The last name is the Moon of the author. I can't remember her first name, but from Harvard Business Review. But there's this, I remember there being a really great line where, because of benchmarking, all these brands are kind of merging towards the middle. And I think that's almost in a way being accelerated by AI, because if we're all typing in the same kind of prompts and queries and all that kind of stuff, we're getting similar kinds of answers. And so there's an or a risk of meandering to the middle like everyone else. And so I think that's a really interesting point around how to make something authentic to you, meaning it's unique to you, even though the trend or the insight around what makes brands unique and different can be the same. It's just a matter of how you do it that really can be your own.
Yeah. I would query, it's not, for us, we say it's not actually about being unique, because I think very few brands are genuinely unique, like in their own category, doing completely their own thing. It's about relative difference. Are you standing out enough for somebody to
I
want
like
to
that.
choose your brand first.
I like that too.
And that is also not a fixed point in time. It's not like, oh yeah, we're different now. We can kind of sit down and relax, because every brand is striving to grow and develop and stand out. You know, it's like a constant imperative, but it's a relative difference, not an absolute thing.
That's a good point.
Ooh, that was good.
Jane, this is awesome. How can people find out more about you and the work you're doing at Kantar and things you've got coming up?
Yeah, well, I would say follow Kantar on LinkedIn. We give previews there of everything that's coming up, all of our reports that we publish, like, you know, marketing trends. We've just issued a report on innovation called Outstanding Innovation, Media Reactions, and BrandZ. Kantar.com is our website and everything is on there. And you can feel free to follow me as well on LinkedIn. Right.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. This has been a really awesome conversation. I appreciate your time.
Great to speak to you both. Okay, thank you.
If you like this show, please leave a review. And even if you didn't, we'd love to make this show better, and your feedback will help us do that.